time to make one of the internet's finest fake products, the CrocMartens, a reality. When I was doing research for the What's Inside Crocs video, I stumbled upon an old meme from 2016. It was the photoshopped love child of Dr. Marten boots and Crocs, called the CrocMartens. So I'll put a little meme here so you can see it. And in the Crocs cut in half video, I asked if you guys are interested in seeing that made, and if you'd rather see a true to meme CrocMarten or a real deal CrocMarten made like a real boot. And 99% of people wanted to see a Croc true to meme, so that's what we're gonna do today. And also next week is the start of the white sneaker series where we're gonna compare the common projects to all of its competitors to see which white sneaker reigns supreme. So now let's get to the making of this unholy abomination. So the first thing I need to do is remove the shoelaces so we can get to this vamp and get it torn off, because I'm not going to use any of this vamp in the final product. Next, I need to cut all these stitches that hold the upper to the vamp without cutting any of that upper material so that we can sew it back on to the Croc upper, I guess is what you'd call it, even though it's like one solid piece of foam. But that's not going to get the vamp completely off, so next I'm going to cut the sole off by just splitting that portion where the sole is heat welded to the PVC welt, because I don't know exactly how to build this. It's just someone's Photoshop job. It's not built around a typical boot building technique. So I'm gonna have to get a little creative and kind of figure it out as I go along. So I don't want to cut off too much too early. And now that I got the insides of the sole torn out, I decided to cut the vamp off because I wasn't exactly sure how much of the welt I was going to need. So I didn't want to cut that off quite yet. And I'm not going to use any of the vamp, so it's fine to just cut it off anyway. And now I need to remove the insole because I don't think I'm going to use any of that in the inside of the Crocs. I think I'm just going to use the Crocs sole and insole area as the foundation of the boot. So I need to just tear all this out. And now it's time to start working on the Crocs. So I'm going to take off the four-wheel drive strap and start trimming down the Crocs heel area. And since I'm not going to be using any of this welt on the toe area of the CrocMartens, I just need to trim that off and potentially use it later if I screw something up on the back part of the welt. And now I'm going to dry fit the two pieces together and start getting an idea of where it's going to fit and how it's going to fit, and start marking where I want the vamp to line up with the upper. And now I'm removing the welt because I'm considering just sewing the upper to the bottom part of the Crocs with some yellow stitching to make it line up right and to get that flush look. But after putting it back on and looking at the photo, it's not going to look right if it doesn't have a welt. Because if you look at the photo, the Doc's welt sits flush with the side of the Crocs. And I think the only way I can get that look is if I trim away some of the Crocs heel area. So I'm just going to take off a little sliver because I don't want to cut too deep and too far and ruin the look of it, because I've only got one Croc and I've only got one Doc to make this work. And this is an important project. And once I've got that removed, I'm going to put the upper back on and mark off where else I need to cut. And also start marking my trim lines so that I don't have tons and tons of foam on the inside, so that I can easily stitch it together when I get to that point. And now I'm going to start cutting my channels so that my upper fits fully flush into the side of the Croc. And also trim off this upper part that I marked, because this is just extra material. It's not going to provide any extra strength, and it'll just make it harder to fit the upper on. And we'll do another little test fit, and it doesn't fit as close as I would like it to. So we're going to trim off about the same amount in the same way, just to bring that channel a little bit deeper in, so that once we get that welt fitted, it's going to sit flush, or as close to flush as possible. And that's much better. It fits pretty well. And so now we need to get that bright green color to match the meme. So we're going to use a little bit of leather dye and rub it on there. And I thought this was going to work really well, but it did not work at all. So I decided just to spray paint it. And it actually looks really good. I like the gloss. It's gonna match the gloss finish on the leather of the upper. And then after I decided to not use the welt and decided to use the welt, it's time to sew the welt back on. And this actually worked out fine because I was able to remove a lot of the bulk from the inside of the heel area of the Docs so that it fits closer and slimmer to the Crocs to make it a better looking finished product. And since this is more of a show shoe and I don't actually plan on wearing this, I don't need all 3 lines of those stitching. So I'm gonna stitch those by hand first to get the look of a fully stitched boot, but without having to hand stitch all the way through all the foam and through the stitching. We just need enough stitching to hold it together. And now to the actual stitching of the 2 pieces together. So since I didn't have to stitch all 3 lines, that's gonna be a lot quicker and a lot easier. So basically all I do is push the needle through the hole, pierce through the foam, and then pull it out through the inside. And then instead of trying to line it all up and pierce through the foam and then line it up with the hole, I just sneak it between the 2 layers and then go up through the next hole and then back down through and then rinse and repeat. And you get that look of a fully stitched line without having to stitch every single hole. And now to sewing the welt to the rest of the boot, because the problem is the welt isn't sewn to the Crocs, it's just sewn to the upper. So I'm gonna run a stitch line all the way around the heel that's gonna pull the 2 pieces together and kind of suck that welt into that recess that we made. And that's gonna give us that nice finished look. And I'm really wearing off a lot of this paint, so I'm gonna have to repaint it again. But this ended up working perfectly. You can see that we still have a little bit of welt hanging over the side, but for the most part, it's pretty flush. So next, all I have to do is trim that few millimeters here and there of extra welt material to get it to lay completely flush, and then sand it off, and we're almost there. And because I ruined the paint and everything's sewn together now, I need to tape everything off. And if you've ever taped anything, the tape job is 90% of the result of your paint job. So I just made sure that I taped all the way up the side of the boot, both sides, made sure that if I did happen to have any overspray anywhere, it didn't end up on the upper of the boot. And then I gave it one more layer of paint, and I just got to get all this tape torn off and do a few touch-up spots here and there, put the laces on, but we're there. We got ourselves some Croc Martens.